All right. I am joined today by Dayna Abraham. Dayna has been my coaching client for about a year, and we've been working together. She's over at Lemon Lime Adventures. She runs Calm the Chaos. It's absolutely amazing. I've been helping with the copy with her and her team for several years now, and mostly just because like everything she teaches is so amazing and awesome, and it's very she's a very easy person to like want to like help and the message she's doing, everything she's doing is so important. And that yeah, I've just been enjoying sticking with her over several years. And that's a whole nother topic of conversation, is how the business has grown in that ways. But today we're just going to talk about the coaching stuff. So thank you very much for joining me,
Well,
Dayna.
I'm super happy to be here. I always say that you're my secret weapon. Because I got my secret weapon over here.
It's not secret if you tell people. Okay, cool. So yeah, let's just get going with. So we started working together like about a year ago. Can you talk me through like what were kind of the things going on in your life that made you be like, I could use some coaching here.
Yeah, so our team had gone through a big shift. I had lost a lot of my team members. I personally was dealing with a lot of like emotional stuff. And I also was in this place where I had a big project coming up that I wanted to complete, and I was really struggling to complete it. But the biggest part of it that finally like pushed it over the edge was as as the expert in my field, I felt like I didn't have anywhere that I could show up, have a safe place to be vulnerable and talk about the things that I felt like I should already have figured out. My own emotional regulation or my own self-doubt or my own fears that seem so small. But they're the things that hold you back. And so I think that was the first reason that I started reaching out to you.
Yeah, and what made you reach out to me for coaching and like instead of anybody else?
Well, you in particular, because I've worked with you when it comes to writing and when it comes to being part of the business. And I've seen the way that you've shown up inside of our business as well, just, um, and knowing like I watched you go through your trainings and with the fearless living, I think
Mhm.
it's called. And so I watched you go through those trainings and it just kept interesting me. And then you actually posted something and you were like, hey, if you're interested, I was like, yeah, I am. Let's try this. This is awesome. I actually didn't think you'd take me on because I was also a client in another format. So, but I'm super glad you did.
Cool. Yeah, so so we started coaching together. Do you remember like what were some of like the early like wins that you got or things that you worked on? I know we can talk about the book stuff, or if you remember anything before that you
I
want to.
think I think the first one was just having that safe place. And
Yep.
then we were just like, having each week saying, okay, let's work through this. And that was just really helpful for me to know I had this safe place to kind of show up. And so when I realized that I've been stuck on this book proposal, I actually had it in my pocket for 2 years. I had turned it in right before March 2020. And I had turned it in. And then after the pandemic kind of like, I mean, it didn't settle down, but after like the initial wave settled down and the editor looked through it, it got rejected. And it took me a whole nother 2 years to finally start working on it again. And I just had this massive mental block. I couldn't get through it. And I remember sitting down with my journal and saying, okay, who can help me with this? Like, who do I know that can get me out of this rut? And your name was one
Good
of the first
question to
ones that
ask.
came up. Yeah. So that was the first thing that we worked on, was getting clear on one, why was I so stuck? And then what could we do to get unstuck?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
do you remember like what kind of like shifted things that helped you get unstuck?
Yeah, that one was particularly about how I had these huge expectations for what I wanted the book to do. I wanted it to be this life-changing book, and I wanted it to reach all these people, and I wanted it to be a national or, a bestseller and all these things. And also I was worried about my expertise because I didn't have letters behind my name. And in my field, I felt like that was a big big deal. And so I kept getting really stuck on how do I make this the best book in the world? And what we kind of worked through together was realizing that I was focusing on the wrong part of the journey. So I wasn't at the part of selling the book yet. Haven't even sold the proposal yet. So at this point, just focus on writing to the reader, writing to the person who this is going to help. And that immediately started unlocking things. And I would actually start writing letters to the reader before I would start writing the book proposal.
Yeah. And then, so how did things go with their proposal?
Excellent. So I ended up getting an amazing book deal. The proposal went to auction with 7 publishing houses, and we got an over 6-figure advance, and we're with one of the top publishing companies in the world.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, and Dana's book, Calm the Chaos, will be coming out, I believe, summer of 2023.
Pre-orders will be summer of 2023. So yes,
Yeah.
the book comes out, I believe, in like August of 2023.
Yeah. I mean, if you are a parent, I couldn't recommend this enough. And even though I don't have kids, I've been in the world long enough to see how amazing Dana's stuff is. Parent, especially if you're dealing with challenging kids, they're having a lot of meltdowns, sensory issues. I mean, Dana's the person to go. It's like her work's amazing. Okay, cool. And then, so what about like so you got your book proposal, and then what about like the writing of the book itself? Did you like you want to talk about
another Oh, so then I had another snag. I got this massive book deal, and then I sat on it for 3 months, and I didn't have a long time to write the book. I mean, I got the deal in April, and I had till December to have a completely finished, fine-tuned book that's ready to go to print. And so 3 months in, I haven't touched it. I mean, I think I had a document that said Calm the Chaos manuscript, and that's it. I mean, there was nothing else, it was a blank screen. And so I was like, all right, I'm stuck, because I had made up all these other jobs like that I said were to help me with the book. So I had started a coaching program to coach parents one-on-one to go through the book material. And then I had completely redesigned the studio that I'm in right now, which is our coach house, because I needed a calm place to write. I mean, I was inventing problems to not write. And so I remember one time coming to a coaching call, and I was like, I'm not writing. I need to start writing, and I don't know why. And it was like, well, you're doing all these other things. Do you really need to do those things? And so we dug into that to get really clear on like what's holding me back. Like, why am I coming up with all these? And again, it was fear. But this time it was a different type of fear. This time I had actually sold this to someone, and there was an entire group of people who had believed in me because I sold to them. And I was like, maybe I oversold myself. Like, what if I can't deliver on what I sold them? And so I was having all of this fear that I wasn't going to be able to deliver the thing that they bought from me, and which is very similar to the original fear. And so I'm trying to think what we did to get out of it, but I remember like as soon as we unblocked, it was just like I started writing.
I think part of it is very similar to like how it was kind of repeating what helped you get unblocked the first time, and like bringing a lot of the tools and things that we did then, and like using
the problem was, I remember this, is that the first one, the thing that got me unstuck was focus on one person, focus on the reader. And I was like, well, if I only sell this to one person, I have not met my goal. Like, this is not going to work.
Right.
And so it started focusing instead on kind of like, instead of focusing on just the one person, it was focusing on what I knew worked. The proof of like, this works, it works, it works. I've done this for 5 years now inside of a membership and helped tens of thousands of parents. Like it has worked. And so leaning on the fact that that works, and then just taking that and saying, okay, what do I already know works that I can start moving into the manuscript? And I already sold them something that they bought. So how about start there? Like put the thing that they bought from me into the book that I'm about to write. And suddenly I had 80 pages of outline instead of having nothing on the page. And now it's just, oh, I'll write one section at a time.
Yeah.
And that made it so much more manageable. And I started focusing on, I can't control the sales. You like help me
Yeah.
focus on the part of the process that I can focus on is I have promised that I will deliver them a manuscript by, the end of December. And I have an editor and I have, copy editors. I have I have a whole team that's going to make sure it's the book that they bought.
Yep.
And so I just had to write it and give it to them. So just focusing on almost that like shitty first draft.
Shitty first draft, yeah, focusing on what you control instead
Yeah.
of like having the whole weight of the world on your shoulders and
Yes.
seeing like, oh wait, all this stuff isn't even up to me. Then
Yeah.
this stuff, I've also got a team that's going to help me with this. And
Yes.
okay, so what's my job here? Getting this stuff out. Cool.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. And you've just been cranking through the book lately.
Mhm.
It's been awesome. And your shitty first draft is based on what I've read is a pretty damn good first draft. So awesome job with that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so another big win you had was around health. Do you want to go into some of the struggles there? What happened
Yeah.
and results?
Yeah. So I have kind of ping ponged or yo-yoed with my weight for a long time. After each of my children, I gain a ton of weight and then I work really hard to lose it. And so but this time I hadn't lost it. And it's been years. I mean, probably, my daughter's 9. So it's been several years at this point that I haven't actually lost the weight. And anytime I've lost the weight, I've had to go all in. And I've had to like wake up at 5 and join like a CrossFit class, or I've had to run miles or bike miles. Like I've had to go all in and it be the thing, the project that I'm working on. And because I have a business and because I have a family and because I have this book project, that's the project that I'm working on. I didn't feel like I had the capacity to go all in, but I also knew that part of the reason I was struggling to show up the way I wanted to, part of the reason I was struggling to write is because my bones hurt, because I was tired, because like all these things that if I could focus on my health, those might go away. And so that's why I brought it up to you. I remember being super nervous to bring it up because we had talked about so many, like, even though we had talked about so many other things, I remember that moment being like, oh, okay, I have this thing that I want to talk about, but it feels really weird. And if you don't want to talk about it, it's totally fine. And I'm so glad I brought it up because I was like, I want to start thinking about working on my exercise and my health and my habits around my health. And you're like, okay, let's do that now. And I was like, no, like in a month, like after this thing's over. And so the biggest thing was just like, what can we do now? Like, what is the tiny thing that we can do now? And really looking at, is it true that you have to go all in, or can you start getting some results like more energy or your bones not hurting as much, those sorts of things, even if you don't go all in and it be your only focus.
Yeah. Yeah. And it
Yeah.
was great. The way you did it, like it just kind of started with these like kind
Mhm.
of like I think it was morning walks or afternoon walks. And like they just like slowly got like more and more days and they got longer. And
Yeah.
like I
Yeah, they
remember,
started out as like little 10-minute walks and it was like 3 days a week or something.
yeah,
It wasn't much at all. And now, I mean, it is rare that I don't walk every day.
yeah.
Like it's just a part of what I do at this point.
Yeah, it was really cool. I think within like 2 months, you were just like,
Mhm.
like you're like, we didn't even need to talk about it anymore. You're like, oh no, this is just who I am now. Like I
Mhm.
walk, and then yeah. What were like what's the results been like? Weight loss
The
or energy
results,
levels and
yeah,
all that.
energy wise, I have far more energy because I wasn't about weight loss for me. It was about like, for me, it's about loving the skin that I'm in and
Mm,
feeling comfortable in my body.
yep.
And so for me, like I started adding in how much water I would drink, and I started adding in supplements that I was taking, and I started a nighttime routine. And it was just like one little baby step at a time until like my healthy habits just are totally different.
Yeah.
And how I interact on a day to day is just different. What I eat, how I eat. I was never eating unhealthy, but it's just the way that I go about things was very different now. And so since, a year ago, I've lost 50 pounds.
Woo! Yeah,
And
Dayna.
so that's the number. And then energy wise, I have tons of energy. Um, and outside, I got COVID a couple of weeks ago. And ever since then, some of the bone pain came back.
Mm,
It just is kind of like a linger, but it was gone
yeah.
to like a point where I didn't even remember what it felt like for my bones to not hurt. Now I've just got one bone, it's in my foot, and like yeah, that's it. But outside of that, like I don't have that pain. I can get down on the floor with my daughter if she asks me to. I can, play with the dogs on the ground. I can even like do a sprint on the road if my daughter's like, hey, let's do a little race. Like I can sprint. And when we would walk and I would do the hills, we live in a really hilly neighborhood. I would have to take my inhaler with me because I would have an asthma attack on hills. And now that doesn't really happen. And so,
Heck yeah.
matter of fact, my asthma medicine had to like run out. I had to get more. I didn't even know that it was out because I don't use it.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's so cool how those like healthy habits start to snowball.
Yeah.
And like when you kind of just focus on something like small and sustainable, and then instead of like forcing yourself and feeling guilty and getting on that whole like thing that people
Mhm.
get onto all the time, like you just start to adopt it like, oh, this isn't so bad. Okay, well, and then you just start to think like, well, what else could do?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, like, yeah, vitamins start to like make sense, and like just making up the workouts longer
Well,
and all
yeah,
that.
and it now, like if I get sick, I might get off track or
Yeah,
we had a launch and I got a little off track, but there was no guilt. There was no like, oh, I can't believe I didn't do that for a week. It just was, you know, all right, like if my heel feels okay, let's go for a walk. Like
yeah,
let's go. Um and so, and the water, I'm back to drinking a ton of water and back to eating good foods, and it's just kind of like a restart. It's really easy to restart now that
yeah.
if I get off for a couple days.
Sweet. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on before we go, so you run $1 million business. You have people, a bunch of people underneath you. You're running a team. How have you been? Let's see, for the past 8 or 9 years on taking time off for yourself.
For the last 8 or 9 years before this year,
Yeah.
none. So our team would come to us and be like, "Hey guys, it's Christmas tomorrow," and we're like, "What? Oh no!"
How did
Like
I turn into Scrooge and like forget that
like
there's
what? And it's not because we didn't want to take it off. We just didn't have any concept of time or like
yeah.
what was happening. And so not only was it us not taking time off, we were like feeding that into our team without thinking about it.
Mm.
Um, and so, yeah, it was just like, as much as I didn't want to have this like hustle mentality, it still felt like that. It felt like because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how good of a team you have. If you're the one who has to pay the bills when they come in, like it's on your shoulders. So you can be like, oh, we're going to take time off as a team. But if like it's still not like taking that time off and then you still don't have enough revenue coming in, you're the one that's responsible for it.
Yeah. All of a
And
sudden that
so,
time off
yeah,
vanishes.
yeah, all of a sudden you're like, wait a second. Like, okay, team, you take off, like we'll do the work. So yeah, there wasn't a ton of time off. Um, it was like it was a focus for us to try to get maybe like 3 days around the Christmas holidays
Yeah.
to and not counting Christmas Day, but like around the new year, we would go, Jason and I would take a little retreat and we would go and plan. Even on that, we would plan the next year. It was our planning for the next year for the business.
Yeah.
And so we're still doing business,
Your
but to
time off
actually
is
like
still working on the business.
time
Yeah.
off was still working. And I didn't think it was because I'm like, oh yeah, we're going to this nice little resort. But we were working on goals for the business. That's
Yeah.
definitely still working. I mean, I've got spreadsheets in front of me. Like that is definitely still working. So so yeah, that's where we were.
And then what about this year? How's that
So
changed?
this year that has changed dramatically, and even with a smaller team, it's changed dramatically because I have a little thing next to my desk that just says, simple, right?
Mhm.
Like, or simplify, I forget what it says, but it's all about like, how can we keep things super simple so that like we don't burn ourselves out, and so that I can have some time, especially with having to write the book proposal and having to have these meetings with the publishing houses, um and get all of that in order, plus now write a manuscript. I knew that I was going to have to figure a way to hand off things in the business to other people. And so last quarter, I think it was last quarter. Well, this summer I was able to go for 2 weeks with my son to France, and the only amount of work that I did was sitting on a patio writing a like a little intro in my book, because I wanted to be able to say that I wrote my book in Europe. That was it. That was the only work that I did.
And yeah, one thing I remember that you were saying was very cool about that trip was like towards the end, a lot of the other like moms, like well, high powered women and great jobs and all that stuff, were
Yeah.
like getting it like, hey, you coming back to work yet? And
Oh
meanwhile,
yeah.
you're still able to like actually enjoy the time in France.
Well, yeah, they were all getting like bombarded. These were like high-powered lawyers, and like, and so they were getting bombarded the last few days of the trip. Like, are you back yet? Are you back yet? And anyone who has traveled abroad and then come back, the jet lag can be really, really hard. And in our like text thread, I just kept seeing them talking about going back to work. And I had a whole nother week where my son and we just slept. Like, we were just on this like, European schedule. And I was like, sorry guys, I'm not coming back yet. Like, my brain does not work. And I just kept seeing that they were having to work. I'm like, how are you guys doing this? They're like, oh, I'm dead. I'm not actually really productive. I'm just showing up because they expect me to be here.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was lovely to be able to take that time to be with my son, to explore, to have that experience together. And, Jason and I took a week vacation together for our birthday as well. And there was literally no work. And we came back to a launch the next week. Now, I wouldn't recommend that to anyone. I really wouldn't. But I mean, hey, it worked. And the conversion rate was actually better on that launch than the one we just ran. So maybe I should go away more often.
Yeah, and then you were saying like just before we got on that like I think it's during the quarter like you took 45 out of 90 days of like were you like gone or gone like writing the
Gone,
book?
off,
Yeah.
like off work, not even writing the book.
Okay.
Because that was the summer, and I didn't actually start writing the book until August. And it's about to be October, so I'm dating this a little bit, but we've only been working on the manuscript for 2 months. And just kind of, like you said, just kind of piling through it.
Smashing through it now, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And so how did our work together help with the no time off for 8 years, 45 out of 90 days you're away?
I think a lot of it was just that continual, like, always checking in, like having that meeting weekly, and just saying, okay, what's coming up for me? And I would, before our meetings, I'd be like, okay, what's coming up? Or what am I worried about? What am I nervous about? Because anything I could control, if I could bring it to the meeting, then we could start creating I knew if we created a plan, because so many of the plans worked, that if I talked it out with you, we would have a plan by the end. And so that, I think that's what helped the most, is just being able to say, okay, I've got a launch coming up and I've still got to write the book. How am I going to remove myself? Or, I see that I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks. I've never been gone for 2 weeks. Like, how's the company going to handle me not being there for 2 weeks? And, those sorts of things, we would have those conversations months in advance, and then start slowly working on those like baby steps to make it work.
Yeah, like that's one of those things kind of without a coach, you're just like, oh, that's a later problem. And then all of a sudden, like your vacation's in 2 days and you're like rushing to get everything done. And then you're away and you're like, did I get all the things done? And did this happen? And it's like, and I've been in that situation. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs and freelancers have been in that situation. Like for us, it really does take like, yeah, like you got to plan for your vacations. You
Yeah.
probably do. And
Yeah.
to make sure that you're actually able to take the time off and enjoy it and not be worried about work, worried that you'll come back and be bankrupt and everything will be on fire and all that other stuff.
Right. Yep.
Cool. Okay, so we got to go very soon. I was just wondering if you could share like any kind of like overall transformations that you feel like in yourself, like your own like self confidence or any other like changes that you've seen in yourself from like the last year.
So I feel like if you were to put Dayna October 2021 and Dayna October 2022, I think I look pretty similar. But I think that I am a completely different human, in the way that I approach problems, in the way that I see myself, in the way that I see my role in the company and in my family, the way that I communicate problems to my team, the way that I trust my team. Like there's just whoops. I'm a fidgeter, sorry. So but in the just like the way that I show up, the way that I think through problems, the way that I process things out has drastically changed. And it's just allowed me to be more confident. It's allowed me to know more about who I am and like own who I am. And I would say that I was riddled with self-doubt, and I've always been an incredibly emotional person, but those emotions ran me and ran my life. And I feel like I am still that emotional person, but now I have only 10% self doubt. And that's just because I'm being honest that there are days that it comes up and I'm like, all right, pop you down again,
Yeah.
like, no, but like it comes up, I address it and I go, why'd that come up? All right, what's under that? And then it goes back down and I feel confident again. Feel strong again. I feel like I can show up and feel really good about what I'm doing in the world and how I'm showing up for my family. And I couldn't have done that a year ago.
Awesome. Yeah. And I love that. Like, yeah, like the self doubt diminishes a lot and it's still there because it's part of your everyone's humanity. So, like, yeah, just being able to like recognize it, kind of learn from it. Like, yeah, what's causing it? Like, is there any like lessons to be learned or like what like signals for doing things differently and just knowing how to manage it itself so that it can dissipate or you can just kind of continue with what you're doing with like as it just kind of bums along for the ride and you're like, okay, I know you're
Right.
there but you're
Well,
not
and
like,
accepting that it is part of the human experience,
yeah,
that it's okay for that to pop up. It doesn't mean that something's wrong with you because you have self-doubt, but it's how do you manage that self-doubt
yeah,
and what can you do with it when it pops up? And like you said, what is it trying to teach you? And if you can recognize that. One of the things that's been a big theme over the last year is just release. Like, what can I release? And
yeah,
so anytime self-doubt comes up, it's like, what is under that I need to release so that it's not going to bother me anymore. So when
nice.
self-doubt comes up, it's almost always in a different form now,
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's like you're kind of
unraveling it.
like unraveling it, yeah, and like growing in different areas now because it's like, oh,
Mhm.
what's causing this? Oh, this other thing that I hadn't really like thought of or addressed yet.
Mhm.
That's really cool. Cool. So anything else you want to share before we say goodbye to everyone?
Just that this has been amazing. And I wasn't joking when I said that I tell people that you are my secret weapon.
Thank
Um,
you.
and someone was like, well, who's your coach then? And they named off all these like big, huge guru people. And I was like, you won't like, this is not one of those people. I said, but he's better than those people. I promise you. So just know that and I think it actually came out on a launch video that this happened. So,
Oh, well,
so
thank you very much.
yeah.
Okay, cool. So yeah, thank you, Dana. And I mean, you've been an absolute rock star of a client. Like you're very self-aware and able to like, you bring like, you're not afraid to like dive into whatever's up on the call, and like, you know yourself well, and you're able to like find tools and processes that work really well for you. Like I've got a whole bunch of tools that I've kind of never shared with you because you've got so much stuff yourself and all the work you've done and just like how well you know yourself, that like once we kind of get to the core of a problem, like you kind of like you're like, you kind of know like, oh, like this is how I work and can fix it. And then like, like you create a process for writing your book that's like been working great for you.
Yeah.
And that's, yeah, a lot of part of the coaching as well is just like helping you find the answers that are already like the solutions that are already inside you, because you've
Yeah.
got them. It's just a matter
And
of like,
normally I don't like coaching that just ask you a bunch of questions and
mm,
like I'm like, just give me
shit.
the answer. Just give me the answer. But I mean, I feel like I have built that trust. I know that if I can be vulnerable and just share what's happening, you're going to go through the process of asking questions that get us to the root of what it is, and then ask questions about things that have worked in the past that we
Yeah.
can use to move forward. And so it always works. I know that the process works. I know that your methodology works. I know that you're going to show up with like compassion and just make it super easy to talk about anything. So I would say if someone is watching this and they're thinking about coaching with you, but they feel like coaching hasn't worked in the past, that to give it a try, because this is something that has worked tremendously for me.
Awesome.
And just being able to like show up, and yeah, it might be because I'm self-aware, but I think it would have worked even if I wasn't. Like I think
Yeah.
you open up that safe place for people to be vulnerable and share, like, this is what I'm struggling with, even if they don't know why they're struggling with it.
Awesome. Thank you. And actually, just real quick, like, what's the difference between the coaching we've had and the coaching that you don't like, where they just ask questions?
So you still ask a lot of
I
questions.
ask a lot of questions.
You ask a lot of questions. Um, I feel like there are coaches out there who learn the questions that they're supposed to ask, and then they
Just doing
just
the script.
continue to just like, it's a script. It's like,
Yeah.
and it's just like these questions over and over and over again. And it's like, well, if I just had a list of questions, I could do that
Yeah.
myself.
What are
Right?
you
Like,
doing here?
what are you helping me with?
Yeah.
But it's when you're able to then be like, okay, let's go back to this over here, and then what's different about that and this. And it's kind of like actually the question you just asked, like, what's different about the ones that ask questions and then the way I do it? And you have to think, and you're like, what is different? And it's that type of thing, but you're doing it with your struggles, or you're doing it with your roadblocks, or you're doing it with the things you're making plans for. And that's what makes it different.
Okay, sweet. Thanks for sharing. Okay, awesome. Thank you very much. Dana Abraham at lemonlimeadventures.com. Get on her list for all your parenting needs. She's got Meltdown Mastery Masterclass to help you with your child's meltdowns. She's got the ultimate guide to sensory to help you with sensory issues and knowing if it's sensory or behavior. That's the upsell, everybody. It's a good one. She's got what else are we? The Huddle, which has a bunch of scripts for what to say in the moment, during defiance, during meltdowns, during when your child's run away, when your kids' siblings won't get along and keep hitting each other. She's got Next Step, which is where you get one-on-one coaching with her UQ framework to make these challenges not only disappear, but give your kids the skills to self-regulate and handle problems they're not calling on you all the time. Then you don't have to worry about the school saying, hey, your kid's in trouble or anything, because your kid's the one solving the problems on the playground. That's the kind of transformation you see at Calm the Chaos. So go there.
Awesome. I love it.
All right.
My little radio commercial.